All right. Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Bollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Dustin. Good morning, everybody. We're going to convene the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board meeting for Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. A couple of quick notes. Meetings are always recorded. We actually have a number of people in the boardroom today, the most I've ever seen in person at the LCB. Just a reminder that the microphones that are up in the ceiling are really sensitive. They'll pick up crumpling paper, side conversations, and all of those things. So let's all just try to be sensitive to those who are listening elsewhere. And with that, we'll move to our first item, which is program review and consideration of canned cocktails at sports and entertainment facilities. And we'll turn it over to Nicola Reed, our compliance and adjudications manager. Good morning.
Good morning. So good morning, Chair Postman, Board Member Garrett and Bollendroff. So I come before you today on behalf of licensing, requesting consideration of approval for licensing managers to develop a review and approval process for sports entertainment facilities that would like to add canned cocktails of 8% or less alcohol by volume to be brought back to the general seating. For a little background, in 1996, the legislature passed a bill that would then become a sports entertainment facility, which allowed for the consumption of spirits, beer, and wine throughout an arena for events, sporting events, concerts, and that type of thing. We later clarified in rule the event types and locations that alcohol could be consumed. Through rule, spirits can be consumed with approval through all areas within the arena, but not back in general seating. The rule further stated that if a licensee would like to request a level of service outside of the matrix within a rule, that they could submit that to the board for approval. In 2019, the board approved our first pilot program, and that was for pre-made batched spirit cocktails of 8% or less for a sports entertainment facility. They went through a 2-year pilot program, were successful, and then grandfathered out of that into a permanent status. That arena later added the 8% canned cocktails also. In the last 2 years, the board has approved 2 additional sports entertainment facilities to have pre-made batched spirit cocktails and also the canned cocktails of 8% or less. One notable advantage of the canned cocktails over the pre-made batched is the minimal human error factor and the ability to test the alcohol by volume, the content within the product. So the request for consideration is due to the overall success of the pilot programs we have thus far, the willingness of the licensee to work collaboratively with licensing and enforcement and adhere to any feedback and make changes that are needed. Licensing is requesting consideration of approval for us to develop a review and approval process. Some of the things we would ensure is that the canned cocktails are 8% or less alcohol by volume, that the operating plan includes the canned cocktails and any public safety measures that could be in place and how the licensee will mitigate those. The operating plan will clearly distinguish how the canned cocktails will vary in the container type of non-alcoholic beverages, for example, bottles versus cans. We will ensure the licensee does not have a history of public safety violations and they have a history of complying with the laws and rules. And we will also have the applicant or licensee attest that should public safety measures increase or should any concerns arise, that we could ultimately pull back that privilege. So essentially moving forward, should the board approve, we would have 2 processes. If a licensee wanted to still have pre-made batched spirit cocktails, we would still gather all of the information, seek input from the local authority, and come before the board to request a pilot program consideration for one. Or if a licensee or applicant that is going for pre-made or the canned cocktail only, if they do not meet the requirements that I spoke of earlier, or if for something within the request is different than something we would usually approve, we would still then come before the board for consideration. Are there any questions I can answer for any of you today?
Questions from the board?
I have a quick question, Nicola, and I'm sure you covered this, but I just want to clarify. How will alcohol, like when I've gone to sporting events, you see alcohol enforcement officers or people in the stadium, how will they be able to identify the container, again, that somebody versus somebody who's got a beer or a other type of non-alcoholic beverage as they're scanning the audience?
That is a great question. And so, for example, we have a sports entertainment facility that anything that is a can does have alcohol in it. And they ensure that all non-alcoholic beverages like water or soda are in the plastic bottles or the paper cups with straws. And that then also is referenced in the operating plan. So enforcement knows what to look for when going out.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
One, I assume a darkened house event means a concert where the lights go down. Okay. You said that if there are a rise in public safety concerns, we have the ability to pull that back. How do we know though? Do we get notified from local law enforcement or the operator, or do we have to go and find that out?
Nope, that's a great question. So we're currently collaborating with enforcement to ensure that any sports entertainment facility that's in a pilot program, or really any of them, are getting multiple visits per month, also visits over different types of event types. They then are taking notes or, giving us feedback of anything they see, and licensing will receive a report monthly of a breakdown of the arenas they went to and any scenarios they noticed, or if they have to get any feedback, or if it was going well, or any areas that might need to be worked on. Another thing is we check in with the licensee. We keep that open communication. With the pilot programs, we check in at the midway point, but we'll be reaching out to these licensees to meet with them, especially if we're getting feedback from enforcement that there's some areas where change might need to occur. So we'll keep that open dialogue so there's no surprises. But if it arose and got to the point where they're not taking the feedback, changing, and moving forward in a different way, then that might be another conversation.
Okay, great. And if we get to that point where we're in the middle of this, I bet the board would love to see some of those reports and have you come and tell us how it's going and what we see. So
yes, licensing would be happy to do that. We keep it tracked by the arena and each visit, and we
Great.
have a lot of data we can share.
okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nicola, it sounds like the facilities have been willing and to improve based on feedback and have been good partners in this. So I appreciate that a lot. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of where we've gone back and given feedback and the facility has adapted or made changes based on our feedback.
Sure, we met with an arena specifically. There were some concerns with a customer being able to purchase more than 2 drinks per transaction. And so there were also some concerns about the alcohol making it into a certain part of the arena where it was not supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they hired an additional 40 plus enforcement liquor staff that would walk around the facility, 10 specifically that would walk around the area in question. They also put up bigger signage to let people know that alcohol could not go past that point. And they also then put training in line for their servers at the points of sale to ensure that they were aware of all the laws and rules governing the transaction.
Great. It's really great to see the facilities be so proactive and want to partner in this way. Appreciate that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we want everyone to be successful. We found that the best way is communication and just being upfront when we notice something or we hear it from enforcement, so it can be rectified and we can make changes. And the collaboration so far through that has been great.
Great. Okay, thank you. Seeing no more questions, we'll entertain a motion to approve the program review and consideration of canned cocktails at sports and entertainment facilities.
I make a motion that we approve the canned cocktails at sports and entertainment facilities.
And
Mrs. Ali, I second.
great, then that is approved. Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Thank you all
Appreciate
for your
that.
time.
Now we'll look at, get an update on rulemaking timelines for all the industries you regulate and turn it over to Dr. Kathy Hoffman. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Postman and board members Garrett and Bollendroff. I'll just get organized here. starting with the rules update this morning, and this is the monthly rules update for August. There's a lot to update you on, and so let's start with the alcohol rules in progress. The project to implement Senate Bill 5940, and that concerns contract packaging services endorsements, is scheduled for hearing on August 31st, and to date, no written comments have been received on the proposal that was approved by you on July 20th. Under this timeline, if there's no substantive changes to the proposal as a result of written comment or the comments received at public hearing at the end of this month, the soonest we can bring a CR 103 to you or rules for adoption is September 14th. And if that happens, the rules would be effective 31 days after filing or October 15th. So moving on to cannabis rules in progress. With respect to our THC compound work, Robert led a successful listen and learn session last Thursday. So that was July 28th with approximately 45 people in virtual attendance. A few comments were received during that session and 3 more written comments followed after the session. So we'll take a look at those and determine what steps we're going to take next with that project. We do have 2 projects that will be initiated by the end of the month, and those concern cannabis plant canopy and cannabis advertising. Jeff will bring a CR 101, so that's the rule inquiry, to you by the end of the month on canopy, and Robert will bring the same, the CR 101, to you for the advertising piece. Also by the end of the month, we do anticipate that these projects will bring significant opportunity for stakeholder engagement and revisions that reflect our current regulatory and authorizing environments. And then, of course, the next agenda item after this is the presentation of the rule proposal for social equity in cannabis. So moving on to general rulemaking, Audrey will bring an expedited rule package to you at the next board meeting. So that's August 17th. That updates email and physical addresses throughout our rules. If approved, she's planning on bringing the CR 103 to you for presentation. So that's the expedited process. There's no public hearing associated with that based on the nature of the rulemaking. So assuming that there's no comments received that would cause us to consider something different with that rulemaking, she'll bring the 103 to you on October 26th, and that will take us to an effective date of November 26th. And then just quickly, yesterday at caucus, I spoke to the number and substance of the many rule petitions that we've received and continue to receive, both last month and this. And if listeners and other observers are interested in learning more about that, we can provide a link to yesterday's caucus. But I won't get into each of those today. So any questions on any of the works in progress?
Not seeing any. No, I think we're good.
All right. So may I move on to the next agenda item?
You can, which is the presentation of the social equity proposed rules. Yes, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chair Postman. So this morning, I'd like to ask for your approval to file a CR 102 to establish the social equity in cannabis program. And I'd like to start with a bit of procedural history about that work. And this is, of course, memorialized in the memo that was part of your package distributed by the agency last Wednesday. But I wanted to share that the procedural history with folks listening today as well as sort of a refresher. So we initially filed the CR 101 for this project on October 27th of last year. And the public comment period for that initial inquiry ended on December 17th, and no comments were received. So rule drafting began shortly thereafter, and it really followed 2 tracks. The first was revisions and updates to existing cannabis licensing rules. So that was adding clarifying language, changing the word marijuana to cannabis. At that time, we didn't have legislation to do that. And then also making the rules more readable and a little differently organized that may lead to greater success in usability, readability, and compliance. And then the second track was the creation of the actual social equity program, and that is in the proposed WAC 314.55.570. That's part of the rule proposal that's being considered today. We hosted a virtual listen and learn session on draft conceptual rules on March 23rd. and there were over 120 individuals in attendance. It was a long session. It was a substantive session, and we did receive quite a bit of feedback that we considered that was incorporated into the first proposal that we brought you on April 13th. And the board did approve that, but based on additional information received, we opted to withdraw that original proposal. We did that on May 11th to allow more time for research, outreach, and analysis because the agency felt it was necessary to do that. So the proposal before you is the culmination of those efforts and many others. And for your convenience, I prepared a table as part of the CR 102 memo that captures both the original proposal and what's in the current proposal. And I'm happy to walk through some of those changes with you now. Is that
Please
appropriate?
do, yes.
So I'm going to go from my actual rule text. That's a little easier for me, I will say. So starting with the definitional sections, we enhanced and added language to clarify what family member means in this context. So we added sibling of a child as defined, in the particular rule section, and then we also added domestic partner as part of the family, the definition of a family member. We also added the word program to the definition of social equity applicant. So we could distinguish between a social equity licensee and a social equity program applicant because there really are two different things.
Can you tell us what those two different, because this is something that'll come up a lot, two different things.
They are two different things. So a social equity program applicant is someone who is applying to become eligible to apply for a social equity license. Does that help?
It helps, and just so everyone knows, so the program is you've qualified under this
Correct.
rubric. It's a pool, and then there's the next step before you're an actual social equity licensee.
Correct. And
Yeah.
at that point, you would be able to apply for a cannabis retail license under our licensing rules as a social equity program applicant to
Right.
become a social equity licensee.
And the rule set really is to create a social equity licensing program,
Correct.
which then will be used to issue licenses.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right. The next definition I'd like to highlight is the new J, and that is social equity title certificate holder. We wanted to make sure that we called that out in rule. I'll just read the definition. It means a cannabis retail license title certificate holder that meets the requirements of a social equity program applicant, there's that word, as determined by the social equity contractor, and is unable to open for business in the city or county where the cannabis retail license is located. So those are really the highlights of the changes to the definitional section from the first proposal. All right, so moving on to subsection 2, that concerns social equity applicant requirements. I want to draw your attention to qualification 1. We changed, and I'll just read the original text to you. The social equity applicant or applicants have lived in a disproportionately impacted area in Washington State for a minimum of 6 months. That's what we had in there originally. We changed that to 5 years between 1980 and 2010. There was a minor change to qualification 3. It was just a word, and then we added language that says the social equity, well, I'm sorry, let me back up here. This now reads the social equity applicant's household income in the year prior to submitting the application was less than the median income within the state of Washington as calculated by the US Census. We added clarifying language into that qualification. We felt that the language before wasn't necessarily concise or clear, so we just added language to make that more concise. Okay, I'd like to move on to social equity contractor review. And that's subsection C within the section that we were just touching on. We added language that would require a social equity applicant to submit documentation verifying the eligibility requirements described in the scoring rubric to make sure that that the social equity contractor was able to verify eligibility for the program through the elements of the scoring rubric. We also provided examples of documentation that could be used to verify eligibility, and there's a list that spans school records, rental agreements, utility bills, those sorts of things. Also, with respect to our arrest or conviction records, if there's any verifying information that folks can provide to the social equity contractor, tax returns, those sorts of things. So we wanted to make sure that we had those things in rules. So there wasn't any question about the types of documents that the social equity contractor might be looking for verification of the scoring rubric. So any questions there?
No, seeing none.
Okay, so moving on to the scoring rubric. Overall, we changed the point scale by essentially doubling most of the points that were available under the criteria. We aligned 1A, so that's 1A in the scoring rubric, removing that 6-month time window to align with what we have in rule, and that is now the time living in a DIA. And then increased the points available from 20 to 40. I won't go into the point increase throughout all of this, but it's just fair to say that we doubled the majority of them. And that the same is true of the cannabis convictions in element 4, I'll call it, for a total of available on that point scale of 80. So again, we doubled the fine points from 5 to 10, probation from 10 to 20, and so forth. Under subsection 6, the question originally was, did you lose your home or ability to purchase a home or rent a home as a result of your convictions? And we added or arrest to include more people who may qualify for that point or may be awarded that point, I think it's fair to say. And then the other main provision that was changed in the scoring rubric has to do with subsection 8. And originally this read, were you a member of a medical cannabis collective garden between 1998 and 2016? And we reworded that to say, did you own or operate a medical cannabis dispensary or collective garden licensed as a business prior to July 1, 2016? And that would, 10 points would be awarded. If there's an alternative, and that's where there's that or. And the original language there, pardon me, was, do you have previous cannabis business experience that would make your business more viable? And we revised that to, did you own and operate a medical cannabis dispensary or collective garden licensed as a business in a DIA, disproportionately impacted area? And we awarded 30 points there. So it's either one or the other. And that brings us to a total of 310 points possible. And I believe before it was 200 points. So any questions there?
Members, any questions on the rubric? No. Okay.
All right. And really, I think the other section that I'd like to highlight is a new subsection 5. And that refers to social equity title certificate holders. I'll just read the new language to you. A title certificate holder that meets the requirements of a social equity program applicant as determined by the social equity contractor may reinstate their retail cannabis license anywhere within the county that they hold their title certificate.
And on that, so the change, we're allowing people who have that to move within the county. Not
Correct.
to another county, but at least within the county. And today they're not able to do that.
That is correct.
By rule? Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so those are the highlights for the changes that are contained in the proposal before you. So any questions before I move into the last piece? Go ahead.
Do we have a sense on, well, I guess in general, but which, how many people are we talking about? Do we know, we have any way to know if this is the rubric, how many people could qualify for the program, and specifically about the dispensary piece? What's the universe there? Do we know?
I'm unsure of that, and that's a great question. And
I don't know that we could know.
I don't know that we could know. I think we're soon to find out, assuming these rules go forward.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, we have a lot to learn yet on that.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about, on the question of applicants having to submit proof of these things that we've been talking about. I know there's been different ways to look at that. And can you just talk a little bit about that discussion and why we landed where we did?
Well, we wanted to make sure that we were capturing, I guess, for lack of a better word, the applicants who lived in disproportionately impacted areas and could demonstrate that to us or to the social equity contractor. Make sure that we were awarding or adding to the pool of applicants those who could demonstrate that they were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs in the way that 2870 intended. And so from our perspective, using that approach helped us realize that ultimate goal and the intent of House Bill 2870. And that was to make sure that those most impacted by the war on drugs were able to benefit from operating these businesses and being licensed as cannabis business owners.
And will we require that on the dispensary piece, people have to show us that they actually were in that business in a legitimate way?
Yes.
And they do that through either a business license or?
Correct, a business license. There's, I'm sure, I'll turn to my licensing colleagues here. There are a number of ways that I'm aware that licensing is able to establish whether or not an individual did have a licensed business.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
No, the first time around when we had to do prioritizing for those folks that were ran a business, a dispensary, that we accepted all different types of information and starting with a business license. But as folks know, that it was difficult to operate under a business that said that they were actually a cannabis business. And so we saw different types of businesses with names that might not have identified them as a cannabis business. And so we looked at, we allowed people to provide us with all types of information from their Facebook page to pictures, for instance. Those are just a couple of other ways.
Okay, great,
Yeah,
thank you.
and to that end, as Becky notes, there are a number of businesses with very different pseudonyms.
Right.
And we did what we could to thoroughly research from sometimes non-conventional places to confirm their business legitimacy.
Just pause and see if there's other questions now from the board. If not, you can continue.
Carry on. Okay, thank you. So if approved for filing today, I will file the proposal with the Code Revisor's Office. That will establish a hearing for September 14th. So a regular board meeting day, 10 a.m. Under that timeline, the soonest that we can consider adoption of rules, assuming we go forward, is September 28th, with an effective date shortly thereafter. This particular rule set is different than some because we're implementing rules that are legislatively mandated. So that 31-day waiting period for most rules that are not related to our legislation doesn't apply here. Couple caveats before we move to a vote. I just want to make sure everyone's aware that it's going to take some time to implement these rules, assuming that we follow that timeline, everything falls into place as we'd like it to. We do anticipate being able to accept applications, assuming we stay on this timeline in the very late fall or early winter, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes to build the infrastructure to make this program operational. And with all of those moving pieces, it's going to take time to make that happen. So I'd like to ask for your approval to file the CR 102 today.
Great. I have one more question.
Of course.
Disproportionately impacted area, and maybe this is for less, but how will that be determined? It's not, we don't determine that. How is that determined, and do we know the timeline of when we might? I understand that we're waiting, but.
We are working with the University of Washington to determine the outlines of those disproportionately impacted areas. We don't have any new updates beyond what we've talked about, I think, in caucus previously, but we are waiting for the DIA maps. That
The legislature tasked the UW with that?
I believe that
Is
was.
that came, or the task force?
They required the task force to provide us with the formula in order to determine those areas, and the task force worked with the University of Washington. Right now, we're still waiting for the maps. We're still waiting for the formula. It's our understanding that they're proposing some changes to that. We will not be able to issue any licenses without that information. We have to know what those DIA areas are.
Thank you, Becky.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
I don't have, David, I don't have any questions, but can I make a quick comment?
Yes, please. I was just going to say, we'll now consider this, but before we take a vote on this, this is that opportunity. So please go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I just want to say that, you know, that we can't as a state reach our highest potential until everyone is included and empowered to be included. And everyone is not at the same starting point. And this is really about getting people to the finish line. And so I really appreciate the work that's been done, both by licensing and rules and board member Garrett. I also want to say that, you know, I think most people know I came from King County, and in King County in 2016, King County Executive developed the Dow Constantine developed the Equity and Social Justice Plan. And I really do believe it's government's responsibility to participate in assuring that there are equitable opportunities. And I've seen firsthand the positive outcome of these types of policies. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank everybody for your effort in this work.
Great. Thank you.
And this is Ali. I want to echo what Jim just stated and to just say this has been the #1 priority of the agency since we introduced the agency request House Bill 2870. A lot of work, time, and effort from licensing, Kathy, your group has gone into this. And inside the agency, the entire agency has been involved with me on working to put something together to try to get us to the point of creating a social equity program and retail license where we can have this opportunity to make these licensees available. So I want to thank everyone for the work that has gone into this. This has been a 2 going on 3-year project of the agency. And then we still have a long way to go, but this is a great step into getting us into trying to create something that we missed the opportunity when we started the process of legalizing cannabis, but we can do something now. So thank you all.
And I want to thank you, Member Garrett. Your leadership on this since day one has gotten us to this point, working with our staff. I want to thank in particular our licensing director, Becky Smith, and her team, Jeannie McShane and Caitlin Bomba in particular, who are here, who've worked so hard on this, Dr. Hoffman, of course. And one thing that I want to note for people is sometimes people don't really know what goes on inside the walls of a bureaucracy, and that we are. I don't see that necessarily as a bad word. But something I think unusual happened here with this is we approved this, we approved a 102 back in April. We thought we had the best possible path forward. The team was continuing to work on that. And then they kept looking, and they kept talking to each other, and they kept talking to people in the community, and they heard from people at these meetings every other week. And they looked harder and harder, and they were hard on themselves and on each other. And that doesn't always happen in any organization, public or private sector like that. And they challenged themselves and challenged the board to do better. And with Member Garrett's leadership, that happened. And you know, a lot goes into it: expertise and research, the ability to work with other people. But I got to tell you, I also think a part of this is a little bit of burning, simmering outrage. As Member Vollendorf was just saying, you know, we really can't advance in society until we're all together on that, and we're not. And that's historic and institutional, which sometimes seems a little technical sounding, because we also know that it's sometimes a lot more overt, violent, insidious than just systemic. And so it is hard. And I think it's good that there's a little bit of that outrage that pushes us to do things and to make us a little uncomfortable about it. And I appreciate the people who have been able to come before the board for a long time, frankly, and talk about these issues and help shine a light on these things. And so I think the process has worked. It's been a little longer, of course, than one. Today is not the end, so I will you know, try to be brief in that sense. We're going to be back here again talking about it. We've got a public hearing coming up, then we'll have to approve the 103. And then the folks who've worked so hard to get this to us today then have to implement it. And that's not going to be easy either. There's a lot of work to be done. But I think we have the most robust, progressive, and legally defensible system we could find. I think when we get this going, we can show people that it can be done. And then we can go back to the legislature as soon as next year and see what the next big steps can be, because there's more to be done and we need to do it. Several people over the last month or so have sent me this quote from Justice Yu on our state Supreme Court. I think she's brilliant. She was talking, this is what she wrote in a majority opinion on a criminal case. Today we formally recognize what has always been true: in interactions with law enforcement, race and ethnicity matter. And then she went on to say, therefore, courts have to consider race and ethnicity in the case that had to do with a search and seizure case, a seizure case. She's absolutely right, 100% right. That doesn't give us as a state agency that same ability to formally and just, you know, specifically weigh someone's race in these sorts of programs. And we heard from a great expert on this, Colette Holt, who couldn't have been clearer about the world we live in today, and what the courts look like, but also just what longstanding case law is. So we took all of that information, we challenged ourselves, is there a way to do it? And again, we've come up with a system that we think is going to withstand legal challenge if it comes. And most importantly, we'll get licenses in the hands of the people who've been waiting for them for a long time. So that's my hope. I think we have that product. And as I said, we got more work to do on this. Certainly encourage people both within and not in the industry to participate in the public comment and public hearing and other ways to communicate with us about this. We need to hear from people. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the CR 102 regarding social equity in cannabis.
This is Ali. I move approval of the CR 102 regarding social equity in cannabis.
And a second?
This is Jim, and I enthusiastically and with pride second that motion.
Great, thank you. And I agree. And so that is approved unanimously. Thank you all for that. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. Appreciate that. We are to the point of general public comment. We have some people online and some people in person. Another quick reminder, we're recording. We're going to start with those that are in the room here, then we'll go remotely. Both online here, no hurry once your call, just get yourself settled and we'll make sure that electronic, everything is working. And so please be patient with us and we will. Everybody has 4 minutes. When you take the microphone, please state your name and association, if any. At 3.5 minutes, Dustin will, well, actually, we have a clock running,
Yeah,
but
but it's only-
I think he will for online. Yes, Dustin will politely remind you you're just about out of time, and then please finish up at the end of that 4 minutes. Great. And the first person that we have signed up in the boardroom here is Peter Manning. Mr. Manning. Nice to
Always
see you.
first, huh? Hey, I'd like to say hello to everybody here. This is attendance, David Postman, Board Chair, Ali Garrett, and Ballandroff. We at Black Excellence of Cannabis, first let me state my name. My name is Peter Manning of Black Excellence of Cannabis. We too are happy that CR 102 is to our liking as well. I want to say really thumbs up to Ali Garrett. She worked hard for this. And on top of that, she is such a great person. Her critics are benefiting from this bill. She just held this rule. She just helped pass. And I commend you for that. That's a beautiful gesture on your part to look out for them. I hope they recognize that. And that's basically it. And hey, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Mr. Manning. And next is Mike Sy.
I guess.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, board member Postman, board member Garrett and Ballandroff, and good morning to everyone here present. My name is Mike Asai with Emerald City Collective Gardens, also known as Emerald City Collective. We were the second Black-owned in Washington State. We were the first downtown dispensary, downtown Seattle, Washington. First, I'd like to say we at Emerald City Collective, we're completely against Delta 8 and Delta 9. Been meaning to make this statement for a while. We believe this product should be banned and removed immediately. This product is a danger to the cannabis community. Our youth are at major risk and we must protect them to the fullest. Today, we feel the new draft rules and rubric for the social equity and cannabis program are going in the right direction. But there is still much more to do to achieve true equity in cannabis. In 2015, I believe the Emerald City Collective would still be in business today, but we are not. City of Seattle did not stand up for us. We were unjustly closed. They did not stand up for the pioneers like myself and many others. I say this because I still have concerns moving forward. The wording, no rush to apply, still pains me today. There indeed was a rush to apply. We were fooled before. I don't want to be fooled again. Transparency from the LCB is very important moving forward. We appreciate the hard work the LCB has done to achieve a successful social equity and cannabis program. Had the social equity and cannabis task force had not been manipulated, the draft rules and rubric would have been what we see today. War on drugs deeply affected the Black and brown community. We are now deeply affected by the legalization of cannabis, not only in Washington State, but across the nation in many legalized cannabis states. This must change. Once again, I'd like to thank Governor Inslee, Board Member Ali Garrett, former Representative Pettigrew, Paula Sardinas, Peter Manning, and Aaron Barfield for bringing social equity and cannabis to Washington State. Many others also played a part, and we thank them as well. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will now hear from some people who are online. First person on my list is Christopher King.
Great afternoon, or I guess morning as the case may be, there where you are there. I just wanted to drop a couple things here. Let's not forget that the social equity thing started out as including reparations for those who've been harmed, but that seems to have been fallen by the wayside. I know that some of that is the legal and political climate of things, but let's not forget, racial considerations have been taken into play with LCB for years. All these last 8 years, when all these white folks got stuff that nobody else got, that's kind of crucial there. But in addition to that, though, a couple questions from Kevin Shelton. He wanted to know about Vince Sears' Compassion, and there's another one, Red Barn Trading Post. These places open up after he had to abandon his work. So just to know how that works and like how they came up and all that. So I know Director Garza wrote him and he responded back, but has not heard back from Director Garza. Also, with regard to the issue of how Ms. Garrett's efforts are helping her critics. I'm not just a critic of Ollie Garrett. Stop playing that game with me. I criticize the entire board. So I'm not picking on some black woman. I don't do that. People know I'm on vacation, not with my sisters, who are two, successful black women. All right. So the point is that the board, if it wants to become known for being transparent, there are some things that need to be addressed, like getting us the documents that pertain to Kevin Shelton's application back when equity started in 2020. Nobody has responded. They provided one document that he sent. There's no explanation of protocol as to what would happen when people like him sent in documents. And this was in 2020. 2021, he approached with an attorney and got nowhere, okay? So we're asking for that file. We can't get that file. So how do you think Kevin should feel about that? That's not transparent. Also, why can't Sammy Saad get his file? That's been going on for months. Why can't we get the files on how Emerald Hayes got licenses? That's been requested for months now, okay? I'm not being rude to you. I'm not being nasty with you. You said I have the right to be outraged. Well, I'm a bit outraged. That's by the law. I'm not speaking to you in an unprofessional tone. I'm just asking you for the documents and where they are, okay? I've also asked you, by the way, your agency fought off a subpoena when I filed for those documents, okay? So you can't expect people to take you seriously as being transparent when we can't get simple documents. I even asked for Ollie Garrett's notes. You could clearly see she was taking notes a month or so ago, and it came back, she doesn't have any notes. I'm like, what, did the dog eat the homework or what? And so, then I also have asked for the notes from you, Mr. Postman, because you always have notepads in front of you and you're taking notes while I'm speaking. Well, those are my notes. You're on my dollar. And so that's just a fact. So I'm entitled to get those notes, and I would anticipate that you guys wouldn't fight that this time in a public records request. Have I been rude to you this morning? Have I asked you for anything that I'm not entitled to? Okay. I mean, have I been rude? Have I been unprofessional? Have I asked you for anything to which I'm not entitled?
We did send you the notes that you asked for, so I asked what's going on there. You sent the request again, but we did send you the one page of notes that I had.
Oh, well, that's terrific. Okay, that's terrific. I see
that
those.
was a while ago. So
that's
and
great.
I did ask you to, if when you have records requests, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to get what you want, to send them to the public records person and CC somebody in my office and not to 150 other people. It just because you send a lot of emails.
But listen, Mr. Postman, I've been doing this for years. I've been successfully suing for public records requests for years. Okay, many times. Okay, Franconia, in Boston area, here. I've won one against the city of Seattle. I sent the email to the correct information officer. If there are additional people attached to that, it doesn't matter. The officer
30 seconds.
Question. Okay. Now the point is, let's get back to Ollie Garrett's notes that she was clearly taking before. I didn't get those. All right. So I'm just saying. All right. I didn't get them. She was clearly taking notes. I didn't get them. That's a fact. All right. So yeah, we're just looking forward to a new future as well. I remember being on the phone with Paula Sardinez. I was on a Zoom call with her and Brianna Corbray a year and a half ago with your Chris Thompson, your legislative affairs director. Had a nice professional meeting, and he indicated at that time he thought licenses would be
that's your time.
in the year. Hey, you run me off so fast. You let other people finish. Okay.
Just go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
That's how you are. Okay, may I please wrap up now, like other people get a chance to?
Trying to tell you, yes, please wrap up now. We'll give you a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate being treated as other speakers are treated. Now, as I was saying, I'm glad to see some of the rubrics are in place. I have a question about some of them, but I'm looking forward to hearing that and see how that pans out. I can also tell you that John Novak and I have responded back on the part of our lawsuit dealing with testing, and the response back from the LCB was a complete farce. We'll get to that later. But thank you very much for your time and have a great day.
Okay, the next person, and the last person I have signed up is Kevin Shelton.
Am I on?
You are. I can hear you. I don't see you, but I hear you.
Good morning. This is Kevin Shelton. I'm one of the founders of Lifetree Collective in Skyway, Washington. As Chris was saying earlier, I just basically asked Mr. Garza. We exchanged a couple of kind emails a couple of weeks ago. And I want the question to be answered today as why can other medical trading posts and compassion clubs like Vince Sears in Tacoma, which a lot of people know about, how can they start their farmers market or their dispensary and they're not licensed even to this day? And they started after I was shut down in 2016. These guys started, I believe, at the end of 2016 and they're still there. So I would just like that question answered today, and that's all I have.
All right. Well, I know Rick's listening, so we'll try to have someone get back to you. Mr. Shelton, thank you. And that's it for today. There's nobody else signed up to talk. So thanks everybody for coming, and those that provided comment, and thanks to the board members. We will see you caucus next Tuesday. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.